Australians didn't set out to teach Americans how to speak English. That's the funny part. It usually starts innocently. An American lands in Australia feeling very confident, because, after all, English is English, right? Same alphabet, same words, same language. Or at least, that's what they think. And then within the first 5 minutes, someone says, "Oh, that's interesting," in a tone so calm, so polite, that it barely registers as a correction. Barely. But something about it sticks. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. The American says something like, "I could care less," and the Australian smiles. Not a smug smile, not a mocking one, just a friendly, relaxed smile, and then comes the sentence that changes everything. "Oh yeah, we usually say couldn't care less." No emphasis, no drama, just information, as if they're sharing the weather. And the American laughs it off, because surely that was just a preference. Surely both ways are fine, but then it happens again, and again, and again. At a cafe, the American asks for a cookie, and the barista politely replies, "Oh, you mean a biscuit?" The American nods, slightly confused but not concerned. Later that day, someone mentions capsicum, and the American waits for context clues like it's a riddle. Pepper? Vegetable? Some kind of medication? The Australian explains patiently, slowly, as if teaching a curious child, but never in a way that sounds insulting. That's the real skill. Australians don't correct you loudly. They don't announce it. They don't make a scene. They simply slide the correct English into the conversation and let you notice it yourself. And Americans do notice. At first, they don't think much of it. They chalk it up to accents, local slang, quirky differences. But then the spelling appears. Color, favorite, realize, defense. The American stares at the screen like it's a typo that never got fixed. And the Australian casually says, "Yeah, American English dropped a few letters over time." Dropped, not changed, not simplified. Dropped, as if the letters just fell off the back of the language truck. This is where the confidence starts to crack. Because Americans grow up believing their version of English is the standard. Movies, TV shows, global media, everywhere they go, people understand them. So the idea that someone else might be speaking a more precise version of English feels unsettling, especially when it's delivered with politeness instead of arrogance. An American might say, "I'm going to write you," and the Australian gently responds, "Oh, you mean you'll write to me?" Not correcting, clarifying. An American says, "On accident," and the Australian pauses just long enough before saying, "Ah, by accident." No judgment, no correction tone, just accuracy. What makes it worse, or better, depending on how you look at it, is that Australians aren't even trying to win. They're not defensive about it. They don't say, "You're wrong." They say, "We usually say," or, "Over here, we tend to." It feels optional, like a suggestion. But after hearing it enough times, the American starts to realize something uncomfortable. These aren't preferences, they're rules. Old ones, British ones, the ones English originally came with. And suddenly the loud certainty Americans often bring into conversations doesn't work anymore. Because Australians don't challenge you head-on, they let you talk, they listen. And then they quietly respond with a sentence so grammatically clean that it feels like it just sat up straight in its chair. The workplace is where it really hits. An American confidently presents an idea and says, "We're going to table this discussion." The Australians exchange a look. Polite. Subtle. And someone says, "So, you mean you want to bring it up now?" That's when the American realizes something terrifying. In Australia, table means the opposite. Same word, same English, completely different meaning. And yet, the correction comes wrapped in curiosity, not correction. The American laughs, a little too loudly, while mentally reevaluating every meeting they've ever been in. Then there's pronunciation. Aluminum or aluminium. Schedule or schedule. Advertisement or advertisement. The Australian pronunciation sounds longer, fuller, like it respects every syllable equally. The American version suddenly feels rushed, like it skipped steps. And when Australians repeat American words back correctly, but in their accent, it lands differently. Not wrong, just complete. What really humbles Americans isn't being corrected. It's being corrected without being made to feel small. Australians don't posture. They don't flex their language knowledge. They treat English like something shared, not owned. And that's what sneaks up on Americans. There's no argument to push against, no ego to fight, Just calm confidence backed by centuries of linguistic history. At social gatherings, Americans start to catch themselves mid-sentence. Did I say that right? Is this one of those phrases? They hesitate before idioms. They listen more. And Australians notice but never say anything. That's the politeness, letting the American arrive at the realization on their own. And eventually, it clicks. English didn't originate in America. American English is a variation. A powerful one, but not the blueprint. Australians don't need to announce this. Their English does it for them. In the spelling, in the grammar, in the way their sentences sound like they've been proofread by history itself. By the end of the trip, something has shifted. The American still speaks American English. That doesn't change. But now, there's awareness, respect, a quiet understanding that the language they grew up calling normal is just one accent at a very large table. And the funniest part, Australians never say, "See, we told you." They just smile, say, "No worries," and carry on speaking English exactly the way they always have, politely, precisely, and just confidently enough to let you teach yourself. By the time the American goes home, they don't tell people Australians corrected their English. They say something else, something far more revealing. They speak English really well. And that's when you know the lesson landed. And once that realization settles in, something else happens. The American doesn't just notice Australian English anymore. They start hearing it everywhere, on the street, on the radio, in casual conversations that suddenly feel unusually well-structured. Sentences seem complete. Pauses feel intentional. Even jokes land differently, because the timing isn't rushed. It's controlled, calm, almost elegant. The American starts copying things without realizing it. They say, "No worries" back home, and it feels strangely natural. They hesitate before saying certain phrases, like they're mentally checking grammar they never questioned before. They catch themselves saying properly instead of right, or quite instead of pretty. Not because they're trying to sound Australian, but because the logic behind the words finally makes sense. Then comes the dangerous moment. The American corrects another American. It's subtle at first, a quiet, "Oh, I think it's actually," followed by an immediate apology, because now they understand the power of politeness. They've learned that corrections don't need volume to be effective. They need accuracy and tone. And that's when they realize Australians didn't just teach them different words, they taught them a different relationship with the language itself. Back in Australia, locals notice the shift immediately. The American listens more, interrupts less, asks questions instead of assuming. And Australians respond the same way they always do, by being friendly, relaxed, and quietly correct. There's no victory lap, no moment of triumph, because for Australians, this was never about proving anything. It was just English. And that's the part Americans struggle to explain when they talk about the experience later. It wasn't embarrassing. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't even obvious. It was like slowly realizing you've been driving with the wrong map. Not completely wrong, just slightly off, and someone gently rotated it for you without making a fuss. By the time Americans reflect on it, they don't feel defeated. They feel informed, humbled in the best way. Because learning that your version of English isn't the center of the language doesn't shrink you, it expands you. Australians never asked to be the teachers. They never raised their hands. They never corrected anyone aggressively. They just kept speaking English the way it's been spoken for generations, trusting that clarity would do the work for them. And somehow, it always does.